Honorable President Metsola, esteemed members of the Parliament, dear guests. It's an honor and a privilege to be speaking here today. The European Parliament is not only a house of European democracy, it has also been my political base for 4 years. So here I feel at home, I feel among friends. Sadly, our fellow Europeans in Ukraine cannot say the same. They are fighting for their homeland, for their loved ones, their freedom to choose their own destiny. The Ukrainian armed forces are putting up a fierce resistance that President Putin did not expect. Ordinary people are on the streets showing the flag to the invading army, inviting them to go home. Ukrainian farmers have become famous for towing captured tanks back home. One story circulating on social media even speaks of a woman who downed a Russian drone by throwing a jar of pickles at it. Later, she contested that it was a jar of pickled tomatoes. How, asked the commentator, did they expect to occupy this country? At the same time, many others are streaming across borders. Over 2 million have reached safety in the European Union. These refugees will keep coming. In the words of one humanitarian worker, in a conflict, always watch which way the refugees are going. In the current war, they are headed for the European Union, not for Russia. Putin's war is an act of raw military aggression against an independent and sovereign country that wants nothing more than to fulfill its own European dream. The aim is to terrorize civilians. We have seen it before in Grozny, we have seen it in Aleppo. Kindergartens, hospitals, residential buildings are targeted in contravention to the international humanitarian law. You have been doom scrolling on your phones just like I have, so I do not need to tell you of the atrocities taking place now, every day, in places like Kharkiv, Mariupol, as well as Kiev, where many people are without water, electricity, food. Putin's war has also left ordinary Russians without access to the truth. They are living in isolated infospace. We thought that in times of the internet, this could no longer be possible, but it is. Our task is to break the wall of lies. It is a complicated task. We need to mobilize our technological potential to win the war for truth. And it goes without saying that global internet platforms have a huge role to play. If you allow me, Madam President, I would also like to address the Russian people directly. Dear Russian friends, the European Union is not acting against you. Our measures are intended to isolate President Putin and his government, which is conducting a brutal war against Ukraine. You are now seeing only the beginnings of deprivation, which will become much worse as our sanctions kick in. Your government is already instituting practices that are familiar to me from the Soviet times, like censorship, like threatening journalists with the 15-year prison sentences for speaking about the war, like rationing for foodstuffs, like asking teachers to report on the political sympathies of their pupils and their parents. Global companies are pulling out of Russia. Airlines are no longer flying. You can no longer use your Visa and MasterCards. None of this is directed against you. It is directed against President Putin and his government. We understand that it hurts you, but it also hurts us. It hurts you because autocrat does not care for the people. He only cares for his power. That is something that is so hard to understand in a democratic world. Last year's Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Novaya Gazeta editor-in-chief Dmitry Muratov called this a question between, and I quote, people for the state or the state for the people. Dear Russian friends, we continue to hope for a democratic and stable Russia that is respectful of its neighbors and is governed by a rule of law. Madam President, dear members, since the 24th of February, which coincidentally was the 104th anniversary of Estonia's independence, the world has changed. President Putin's invasion of Ukraine has ushered in a period of insecurity on our continent that we have not seen since 1939. And like we saw after the Second World War, our world will not return to the status quo ante. Russia's relationship with the outside world will be different. How to restore the trust in respecting international law and order? European attitudes towards security will be different, and our institutional setups will need to adjust. And we might just have rediscovered what the liberal international rules-based order was all about in the first place. So in short, we will in the future speak about before times and the after times. The free world has already begun to respond, and the European Union has been at the forefront of this response, which itself is a welcome change. The EU is not normally seen to be a particularly nimble organization, but in terms of security, we have changed more in the last couple of weeks than we have in the last 30 years. We have imposed 3 packages of tough sanctions on top of those existing already since Russia's invasion to Donbas and annexation of Crimea in 2014. We have frozen assets, stopped Moscow's access to its reserves held abroad, and thrown Russia out of SWIFT. We have closed our airspace to Russian-registered, owned and operated aircraft. We have shut down disinformation channels masquerading as media outlets. And we have acted to use the European Peace Facility to send €500 million in much-needed defensive weapons and non-lethal aid to Ukraine. The EU has acted with an urgency, conviction, and unity that has surprised President Putin and the world. And dare I say, we have also surprised ourselves. We have indeed acted as a geopolitical union. Our citizens have responded as well by opening their pocketbooks and their hearts, by welcoming refugees, often into their own homes, by volunteering on humanitarian missions, by collecting food, clothing, and medicines for those fleeing the war. And let's not forget about the Irish fishermen. Our citizens are showing a generosity of spirit that makes me proud to be Estonian and proud to be European. I know a bit about kindness of strangers. As many of you know, I am the child of deportees whom Stalin sent away to Siberia. My mother was just 6 months old when she was deported on a cattle car along with her mother and grandmother to what Estonians call the cold land. It was a stranger who gave my grandmother a jar of milk that kept my mother alive during this journey. It were strangers who dried the baby's diapers on their skin as it was the only warm place in the cattle car. And it were strangers who helped in untold ways when they were allowed to return to Estonia. So you could say we Estonians have some experience in being deported and fleeing wars. And we also have some experience with Russia, which we have been trying to share with the European Union since we joined. It was 78 years ago today when the Red Army bombed my home city, Tallinn, to the ground. But my mother, the same baby who took her first trip abroad to Siberia, always taught me that it was impolite to say, "I told you so." Madam President, dear members, we are in this for the long haul. We will have to exercise strategic patience because peace is not going to break out tomorrow. Russia expects us to make a step back soon. As Dmitry Medvedev explained to Putin in a recent public meeting of the Russian Security Council, and I quote, "Sooner or later, they, the West, will get tired of their own initiative. They will come to ask us about returning to discussions and negotiations regarding all the matters of strategic security." End of quote. Putin will come to test us, and yes, we will have to resist. That means that we need to keep supporting those fighting for Ukraine's independence, while giving time for the sanctions and isolating measures to work to their full capacity. This will require a sustained effort from all of us, but we need also to think about what comes next. I see two areas of action. First, we need to hardwire our fundamental change of heart into policy of smart containment. We all want a democratic and secure Russia. This House expressed that desire last year when it honored a Russian opposition leader, Alexei Navalny, with Sakharov Prize. But what I mean by hardwiring is that we need now to consolidate with the free world what the free world has accomplished in the last weeks and build on it. We need to do this together with our trusted transatlantic partners and others who are like-minded. And there are many like-minded partners. If you look last week's UN General Assembly, the vast majority of the world community, 141 states, voted to condemn Russia's military aggression against Ukraine. This vote demonstrates not only a victory of multilateralism, but a win for the rule of law. We also need collectively to give our strongest support to the International Criminal Court once the time comes. Last week, ICC prosecutor Karim Khan announced that 39 state parties to the Rome Statute had referred the situation to his office. This enables him to go ahead with the investigation in any past and present war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide committed on any part of the territory of Ukraine by any person. Here in the European Union, we need to push harder and faster to cut our energy dependence on Russian gas and oil. Because we have already committed to the green transition, this will be a win-win for our energy independence, but also good for the planet. We also need to move quickly to synchronize Ukraine's power grid with that of continental Europe and make sure all parts of the EU are synchronized into that continental grid as well. Turning to defense, our decisions of last week to use the European Peace Facility to assist Ukraine are but the first step towards strengthening our own continental security. We must transform our deterrent posture into a defense plan. I'm mindful that not all European members are NATO allies. When my father was leading the Estonian negotiations to join NATO, he was often asked, "Why do you need this? Russia does not pose a threat anymore." Well, we knew our neighbor then, and we also know our neighbor now. I can only be grateful to the decision to join the Defense Alliance, but being part of the alliance also comes with the obligations. The 2% of the GDP defense spending target must become an absolute minimum requirement. Estonia decided this already 10 years ago. And allow me here to thank Germany for having taken the previously unimaginable decision of raising its defense spending to 2%. All of Europe thanks you. Let me say here clearly that as we strengthen European defense, we need to work hand in hand with NATO. Time after time, we have agreed that stronger Europe means stronger NATO, just as stronger NATO implies a stronger European defense. I look forward to a third joint declaration between the EU and NATO on the matter. A stronger European defense means planning our spending wisely and in coordination. We must concentrate on those capabilities that are too expensive for any individual member state to develop on their own, such as longer air defense, including missile defense. Our European capabilities need to be mobile so we can move them quickly if we need to, and they need to be state-of-the-art. Russia may have an enormous military force, but we can compete with quality, breakthrough technology. I urge all member states to submit only PESCO projects that bring technological innovation to the table. And here is a sobering thought. In stepping up European defense, we must find a consensus within the EU that sometimes the best way of achieving peace is the willingness to use military strength. These are my thoughts on the need of policy of smart containment. Let me now turn to the second area where we should concentrate as we think of the post-war order. And this is the future of Ukraine. Madam President, dear members, Ukraine came under attack in 2014 because it wanted to join the European Union. It came under armed attack on the 24th of February because it seeks to take its rightful place among us. It is in our interest that Ukraine becomes more stable, more prosperous, and solidly founded on the rule of law. I know from Estonia's own experience that this is how it works. But it's not only in our interest to give Ukraine a membership perspective, it is also our moral duty to do so. Ukraine is not fighting for Ukraine, it's also fighting for Europe. If not now, then when? I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prime Minister.